This was years previous. We were both at a party given by
Someone.
famous author. And it was very crowded, lots of people publishing, all walks of publishing.
Like a barbecue.
Yeah, and Hallie and a couple of other young women came up to me, and Hallie said,
That's when I was an editor.
This is when you were an editor, and my principal books were with Farrar, Straus and Giroux. And no, also I had Imogene's Antlers out, so I was also working with Crown Random House. And Hallie came up to me and she said, David Small, we love your work, and we're going to try to get you on our side. And I thought,
I'm direct.
I thought that was so honest and so direct. It was a pity that
and
I
flattering.
And flattering. And then years later, just,
I have a very good memory, so if someone's work I like, wherever I am, one person I represent, I liked his work in 1992. I asked my boss if we could use his work for a story I had acquired, and he said no. And so in 1998, the first thing I did was try to track him down up in Canada, and I found him too. So I know what I like.
So, given the story of when you met, party or kind of solicitation?
A letter, a beautiful letter.
Beautifully.
Yes, not a solicitation.
Yeah, you're right. That cheapens it, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It does. I'm sorry.
I forgive you.
What recommendations would you give other creative authors or illustrators to help find their
Well, David has some tips. No thieves.
Yes.
No sociopaths.
they're hard to detect, though, because sociopaths
Especially sociopaths.
they're very hard to detect because they're charming, they flatter you,
They are, yeah. Well, I think it's a lot harder today. I mean, as an author myself, I decided to be represented by another agent at my own company because obviously I like the way we do business. But there are so many. All you need is a business card and suddenly you're an agent. And I think it depends on what is important to you. If people look at Pippin Properties, you see clients who come and they never leave because we have integrity and we make good deals. So I would look at how long people are there, do people come in and out the door all the time? If so, maybe there's a reason. Some people are agent hoppers, but for the most part, the agent would play an equal role in why people leave. And I would look at, if I'm an illustrator, how is the agent going to show your work to potential editors? We have portfolio parties all the time because we're right in New York and people love to come to have coffee or wine with us, look at all of our artists. They bring manuscripts. So if you have someone in Idaho, how are they going to show your work?
What if, let's just say, I have a story, and I'm like, I really want the story to get out there, I want someone to do a great picture book. How do I go about finding an agent here in the Midwest? In New York, it's easy,
Well, the way I would do it, yeah, you can look through lists like Publishers Marketplace, but all that's going to do is tell you, do you want an agent who's made 50 deals that year? Probably not, because would they have time for you? What are the deals they're doing? What do they look like? But what I would do, I guess, it's kind of obvious, but I would go to a bookstore, like the Bookworm, BookBuzz. I would open my favorite book, look at who they're dedicated to, and a lot of times the agent's name pops up. And if the person was so happy with their agent that they put their name in the book, it's a very telltale sign.
That's good. Yeah, I never thought about it. I remember you once, I have several friends who have been trying to get published and want to get an agent. And I remember asking you, what do I tell them? And you said, well, there is this site that they can go to where to get on it, you have to have made at least 10 deals. But what you're saying is beware, and I know about this too from other people's experience of, their agent getting them like 20 books all at once. That's as bad as them not paying any attention to you at all. Because then you have 20 book contract and you think, wow, I must be fabulous. But in fact, 90% of the books suck as stories.
And you're tied up for the next 7 years.
And you're tied up for a decade.
And you feel like you're in prison, and you spiral into a deep depression. Have work paralysis, and then your career's over. Yes, exactly. I mean, so yeah, I like looking in who represents the kind of quality work I aspire to do, and how you find that out. There's a number of ways, but I wouldn't necessarily look at who's the loudest.
So, Catch That Cookie, kind of a retelling of kind of a timeless stuff. Can you give us some background on how you decided to, some background on how you came about writing that story, retelling the tale?
Sure. The story was really to me, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with the premise of the book is a little boy who doesn't really believe gingerbread men can run. And it started with this kind of funny story. My son, Marshall, who is the star of the book, well, sort of the star. The gingerbread men are close second through 10th. He came home from preschool with a gingerbread recipe, and many years ago. He's 9 now, and he always liked the kitchen. He really wanted to bake the gingerbread men, and I personally am not a huge fan of the taste of gingerbread, and we already had a lot of Christmas cookies going, and so I kind of put him off, let him help me with other recipes, but he's relentless, very persistent. He wants something, he's a neg. So throughout the whole year, he kept asking me to bake these gingerbread men. I kept putting him off, and then it was time for the end of the year picnic, and he was going to kindergarten the next year, and he asked if we could bring them to the class picnic. And I live in New Jersey. It was 90 degrees. Didn't really want to turn the oven on to 350, but mommy guilt. So we made them, and I borrowed the cookie cutters from his teacher, Mrs. Gray, who's also a character in the book. And so we made them, decorated them, and then we had a huge pan of them. We put them in a big aluminum turkey roasting pan, put them in our minivan, driving to the picnic, I start the car to drive to the picnic, and I noticed him doing something weird I'd never seen him do before. He's locking all the van doors. And I said, I might not notice something big he does, but I always notice little things. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, he's afraid the cookies would run away. And I thought it was so, sometimes what someone does or a story sticks with you and you know it has to be a story. And it doesn't happen to me very often, but that one I never forgot. And about a year and a half later, I returned the cookie cutters to Mrs. Gray. So you get an idea of my pacing. And I said to her, how did you get him, what did you do to make him think they could run? And she said, well, we do the great gingerbread hunt every year at the preschool. And I said, well, let's do a book. And she said, really? You want to do a book? And so I went and watched the hunt, and they show riddles, and the gingerbread men end up neatly back at their snack table waiting to be eaten, and I tried to write it as a story, and it was incredibly boring because, it's meant to end up as snack time. So then I realized it was really about believing in magic and believing that the impossible can happen. And, if someone described a whale to you and what they can do, you would, I think I heard this in Boyhood, you wouldn't believe this exists. There's magic all around us every day, so we just made it part of the day.
So how did you take that story then and shape it with the pictures that you picked up?
Well, first of all, I really love the way the text moves. I love the language. I love just the rhythm of it, and it made me remember a lot about being in kindergarten. But I remember telling Hallie.
What were you like as a kindergartner?
That's another book.
I don't know if I want to go there. But I remember saying the one thing that I don't want to do about this book is I wish I didn't have to draw a class of kindergartners, page after page after page, because it would mean, separate personalities. I was also thinking about a much larger kindergarten class. We talked a lot about how many kids ought to be in the class to typify it.
Preschool, yeah.
To typify a school nowadays. And anyway, I sort of solved that by giving the kids a kind of herd mentality, so that I could visually group them all together and make them just put a wash of color over them. And I did make separate personalities. I think the hardest thing about it was doing the interior of the book, was that the business about there being magic coming. And I remember at one point I thought every time there's a hint that magic is going to be in the book, I would bring in this blue wash of color, kind of magic, purpley blue, and we abandoned that when we came up with a new ending, or a picture for the ending that you had written.
Well, you came up with that, and that, the rear view mirror changed that took the book from being cute and funny to being incredible.
Magic.
I thought I was...
So that's interesting, how much in this process changes. And I think because you guys have a different relationship, I'm interested in how special that was compared to you get a script, and you like it, but you don't know the person who wrote it. And you have a relationship with it.
You generally never talk to the author.
She's your agent, so you guys probably had an ongoing conversation about them. So how much did the book evolve and change and turn into much more of a collaborative effort versus here's a script you were written for?
Well, I first was very nervous that he would hate it and have to tell me he didn't want to do it. But I trusted that he wasn't going to be a martyr. So that was weird. And we talked a lot about the magic at the beginning and worked out some, like that basketball scene, that was haunting you, the basketball gym scene. But I think I tried to help him in any way I could, but I always
There's a lot of
defer
back and
to...
forth, and because they were based on real people in Hallie's life, about the character of the boy, the character of the teacher, nothing about the characters of the kids.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. You kind of have almost an advantage, have an extra. You can go and say, hey, tell me some more information, some more background.
Yeah.
It reminds me of how sometimes the script writer is on set discussing with the director the direction of the movie, and kind of felt the same. It seems like
Well, Hallie put up with a lot of strange sketches, I'd say.
Well, and I also gave my comments when the character was looking very strange for a while when you were finding him, but I gave my comments through the art director. So we only talked when we were solving a problem together. And then I would notice, a few times he changed my text in the dummy, and it was kind of a weird feeling to see something you didn't write in there, but it was always better. So I was happy. In fact, that page that says hundreds of them, that's your line.
It's just a word. Right? No?
It's a different line.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's yours. If you don't like it, talk to him.
That's what I think is really cool about it. It makes the book, when I read it a lot, knowing the background behind the book, it was very apparent that it was very, much more of a collaborative effort than some of the books you read, where it's just like, picture book, especially when you read it, like, there's no discussion.
Well, you know, there always is a discussion between the illustrator and the author, but they don't know it because they have this buffer of an editor and an art director. And if somebody's got a complaint, it's usually better to tell it to the editor who's a disinterested party basically, and can convey it in non-emotional words. And that's a good criticism.
Yeah, and that's why I'm interested. Was there times where it hindered the process because you guys, had a different relationship?
I don't think so.
I think, well, we've worked together for 15 years.
Well, yeah, exactly. You have trust.
We have such a level, yeah, and I know him so well in the way he goes about making his books that, and it was also, it's my 6th book, my 3rd picture book, so I have a thicker skin, so I wouldn't be offended if he changed my text. Like on my first book, I might have, you always have a thin skin, but it gets a little bit thicker, so we were both in a pretty good place.
I think that's a good lesson for any audience that wants to be writers in that process.
Well, you hope it does,
Yeah.
at least a little. I mean, it never does fully, but I wouldn't feel uncomfortable with David changing a line of my text. I would be able to see if it wasn't better, I would say, get that out of there. But every time he did it, it was better, so I was grateful.
So there is, I've been told in conversations with about this story, both of you, that there's a specific story where, about the cover that, I don't want to say tested your relationship, but it's a very interesting story about the process of the cover of this book and how it was really painful.
Yes, and that's my cue.
Is there a story you can show us?
And I haven't not seen this.
Yeah, I haven't seen this at all. So we're going to pull our chairs
I have a little
aside.
PowerPoint here.
PowerPoint about it.
And this is all about me, folks. It's all about me.
Put the screen down here. There we go.
I like that.
The screen coming in, nice touch.
Slowly unrolling. As you all know, the life of a children's book illustrator is one long, blissful continuum of enchanted days with the wonderful little animal friends gathered around you, encouraging you to follow your bliss. And here I am chillin' after a full year of work on Hallie's book. I feel good about the book. I feel the interior art's the way I wanted it. And, but best of all, at this point, I have an approved sketch for a jacket. And that is unusual, for me anyway. You know, the jacket art is the hardest part of a picture book to make, for me. Because it has to be one, it's usually, by the way, the last image that ever gets drawn, because it has to be one dynamic image that sums up the whole story and is exciting enough that it'll just jump off the shelf into the buyer's hands. So, everyone in New York seemed happy with this. I liked it. Good cover image. I worked a long time on that scout searching the plains for the enemy kind of attitude. The only thing that none of us were really excited about, well, least of all Holly, was that title. Searching for Gingerbread. It just didn't have the kind of snap we wanted. And we've been talking about it for a long time. Nobody could come up with a better idea. And so I, thought my work was done there. All I had to do was add color, and that I could easily do once I got to Mexico. Yes, Mexico. Sarah and I have been going down there for about 20 years now. And last year, we were really looking forward to our 2 months in Mexico because, well, you remember last year. According to the National Climate Data Center, last winter, between December 2013 and February 2014, was one of the worst periods on record since they started, for the whole 48 contiguous states, since they started keeping records in 1895, I think it was. It was cold, man. And as you remember, it didn't let up. It took us 3 friggin' days to get out of O'Hare. But when that chink in the clouds opened up, it was like the Red Sea parting. And Sarah and I, the chosen people, were released. And there was my little place in Mexico, just the way I'd left it. My footprints still embedded in the sand. We weren't down there for long. I think it was maybe a week and a half before the phone rang. Holly had come up with a new title, Catch That Cookie, and it really was the perfect title.
Not fair.
The problem is, Holly having come up with the perfect title meant that my perfect picture was no longer wanted. What can you do in a situation like this? Gnash your teeth for a while and then get down to work. And for that, you need the isolator. Yes, friends, the isolator. The isolator has widened still further its lead over other self-sequestering units with its revolutionary pinpoint focus technology. A soundproof hood with solid lock neck attachment, tightly abutted perception apertures, its own oxygen tank, and of course a liquid feeding tube hole, allowing you to fully concentrate on the work at hand without having to budge from your chair for days, nights, possibly even weeks, whatever it takes. Why, I ask myself now, did it take me so long to realize that this original image of mine was just not going to work? I was in love with that gesture, but you can see from my notations I was already considering changes. I changed the kid's posture. I thought that was good. But then somebody, the art director, Lily, I think, suggested that the cookie was too large and that maybe the kid shouldn't be able to see the cookie because it didn't look like an even match. So now I've got the cookie a little better size, but you can tell from the soldier-like attitude of the kid and the rather bored expression on his face, he was running out of steam, just like I was. And you know, folks, running out of steam is not a good idea when the drop deadline has already passed. I had to somehow kickstart my enthusiasm again. So I started considering stealing ideas from old movie posters. Needless to say, I didn't show this to anybody in New York. The look of utter panic on this kid's face reflects exactly the look of, or the feeling that the illustrator was going through, hidden, of course, by the isolator. It's a great machine. Where am I here? You know, there comes a certain point when you're being, let's say, waterboarded, that you become distressed and so wretched that really all you want is for somebody to tell you exactly what to do. And I was at that point inside that thing there. I finally had to confess my ideas all sucked. And then at my darkest hour, Hallie called up with what sounded like a really great idea. We had this wanted poster on the back of the jacket, and Hallie, a friend of Hallie's, I think, had suggested that we just take the back jacket and move it to the front, and it would be a good jacket. So my nerves began calming down. I felt, this is exactly what I wanted, marching orders. I was now just a lackey along for the ride. Started sketching with renewed energy and tried out different attitudes, different postures. Why this wasn't working, I didn't exactly know. Maybe this had too much to read for a jacket. This has less to read, but it's still not working. And I could tell it wasn't working, but I wanted it to work. But I could also tell from the kind of half tones I was receiving on the telephone from New York that nobody there was exactly over the moon about this design. And in fact, I found out later that Hallie herself was often on the floor of her office in tears over this design. This is why we have studios, folks. Artists need a place to express themselves in private. Another full week passed before Hallie, bless her heart, came up with a brand new idea. David, she said, I've got another idea. I said, She said, let's try to integrate the story's characters into the display type. Just try it. I think it'll really work. Here I've integrated the characters into the display type, and they look like bugs. This would be a good jacket for a book called Catch That Cootie. Hallie said, "No, David, you're going backwards. Keep the characters integrated with the text." It's a little better. Kid looks like he's stumbling through a warped hula hoop or something. And somebody said, "We've really got to see that whole cookie." So, by the way, every drawing I'm showing you represents about 50 in the wastebasket. But here, suddenly, something started changing. Changed the font. Kid looks good. Can read the thing. Like the exclamation point on the right, and especially like the evil little cookie swinging off the E. And so did everybody in New York. And suddenly, voila, we had our jacket. Yes, we finally had our jacket. And it was time for me to relax and enjoy what was left of my Mexican vacation. Are you married to an illustrator? Are you married to an illustrator but can't afford a shrink for him or her? This is a familiar situation, and it's easily, cheaply remedied. My wife always chooses the isolator. Comes with its own head vise, chest, wrist, and ankle straps, plus a large capacity potty. So you can go out and enjoy lunch with a friend and not worry that your mate might hurt somebody or soil himself. Try it, you'll see. Eventually the screaming will stop. He'll come back down and drift into his own little world. Thank you.
My only note would be they made me change the title. I liked Search for Gingerbread.
Did you?
Yes.
Why didn't you fight for it?
I didn't like it that much. I wanted to see you go through this because we wouldn't have gotten to see that if you hadn't.
hadn't
It
worked hard
was all a
enough.
ploy.
So, what advice would you give?
Even in my fine art. But I think, at first it's a point of concentrating on what's important, and that's the art to begin with. But then, to become an illustrator, you've got to go to New York to get work, I think. I know there's all kinds of opportunities for self-publishing nowadays, and I just haven't seen any good results from that. I've met a lot of people who don't want to take criticism, who don't want they don't want their stuff being messed around with. But that's what the whole thing is about. It's a team effort, like they say in sports all the time. I really, really need criticism myself. I don't think every line I make is perfect, or every picture I make, positioned right. And so I need that feedback. And you especially need to learn to work with people, I think, nowadays when publishing moves so quickly.
I think one of the things that
The question was suggestions for getting in.
advice for the new author.
I have a few bits of advice, and some of them are obvious, and I still tell them to people because there is no room for laziness in this world. There's no room. There are 1,000 people behind you who aren't lazy, who want that top spot, who want their book to be read. And I think what I see as an agent and also as a writer, an agent only gets a first read once. And after that, they get to read your revision, and your next revision, and your next revision. So send the very best work you're capable of the first time. Work on it at home, months, years, however long it takes, until you don't know what else to do with it. I'm working on a novel now, and I feel the same way. I have a reader ready to read it, and I keep putting it off. I haven't gone as far as I can go, and I want her first read to be favorable, if there's anything to it. So, and I on our website it says the world owes you nothing. You owe the world your best work. And if you can't stand behind your own work and know it was the best you could do at that time in your life, I always say at that time in your life because you always can get better, then you shouldn't be publishing it. You shouldn't be publishing it. And I truly believe if it's the best you can do and there's merit to it, an agent will see that. I think people don't understand at least when they submit to us, someone always reads the submission. Hundreds a day come in. There are people who I don't always read it unless it gets to me. or otherwise we wouldn't have time to work with people like David and Sarah. But no one always reads it, and if it's good, you'll hear from us. And if you don't hear, there's no reason to call, write, email. You need to go back and figure out why people aren't writing back to you, because every agent wants to find the next great book to represent. So I think that's my main, no lazies. We expect you to work as hard as we work, harder, really.
I have when I wrote my first book and illustrated it, I was still teaching at Kalamazoo College. We had the winter semester off, and Sarah and I had some friends who gave us their empty apartment while they were moving. And so we got to go to New York for, was it 2 months? We were there 2 months. And I took along this book and a whole portfolio of drawings to show that just stuff that I'd done in the colleges where I worked for the newspapers at the colleges. No assignments, just drawing, trying to make good illustrations. And I went out the first day and went through what seemed like a pretty painful rejection. And I came back to the apartment that night. I said, I'm not going out there again. I can't take this. And Sarah patted me and she said, I understand. It's got to be brutal. I mean, the city is imposing anyway, but the weather was terrible. It was February. And the next morning, after we had a good night's sleep, Sarah said, I said, well, what are we going to do today? We've got 2 months in New York. She said, well, I don't know. Why don't you just take your portfolio and take it around to a couple more people on your list. Give them another chance. And I thought, give them another chance? The world hasn't given me a chance. Why should I give them another? But she changed my whole way of thinking about it that day. And another thing that an editor said to me once when I was terrified, because I had an overnight assignment from the New York Times to come up with a very skinny, long drawing about skiing, downhill skiing. The only space they had was at the top of the column. It was that shape, and I called it downhill skiing. And I remember calling up this editor, Alan, and I said, I don't know what to do with this. He said, what are the dimensions? And I gave them to him. And he said, what's the subject matter? And I gave it to him. He says, oh, what fun. We'll figure this out. And that changed my attitude, too. Just changed it completely. It was just a different way of looking at it, instead of shaking in my boots.
Well, it goes back to what you said earlier about the team effort.
Yeah.
I mean,
I asked somebody.
And asking people what you said about you needed that criticism and you needed that hope and turning something upside down to go, oh yeah, there you go.
Right.
And I think also as unpublished writers who want to be published, you look at a seemingly simple book like Catch That Cookie, and I told you this funny story. My son locked the car doors and suddenly there was a book, and it's not like that. After it was acquired and before you ever saw it, there were 25 revisions done in a costume kind of like that one in my family room, crying. How am I gonna? There were ping pong tables, gingerbread men running on ping pong tables. There was so much horrible stuff, even after it was acquired. Like, it's not, I think a respect for the work involved is necessary before you even start typing.
I think it's a good lesson. I think a lot of people think when you purchase, it's good to go. You're done. There you go.
That's what I thought.
And by the way, Hallie was my first editor on Stitches. She was my agent, but she read the first chapter that I wrote back in somewhere before 2001, I think. I sent you a chapter and you said...
With one little picture.
With one little picture, and you said, this is going to be a book. And for the next 10 years, she would ask me once or twice a year, how's it going on that book? And I would lie.
I think it was a novel at the time.
It was going to be a novel, but I knew I could
But
never
it was good. It
write
was good even then.
But I kept lying to her, and then the turning point came when Sarah and I went to Paris and discovered all these wonderful French graphic novels. They were so much better than anything I'd ever seen in America. And I came home and began thinking again about that story and thinking, I think I can tell this in pictures. And she lived through the first 12 versions at least of that. And it was Hallie who let me go on that for 6 or 8 months before one day she called up and said, honey, you're doing a great job, and I just love all this material you're sending me. But David, darling, I've got to remind you, books have chapters. Books have organizational things that make them easy for people to read. Books have themes.
It's devices.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to turn the page.
Yeah. And I said, themes, this is my life. I can't make a story out of it somehow. What do I do? Make a college outline? And Hallie said, well, I hate college outlines, but maybe that'd be a good place to start. And he really helped me through that.
Good. Well, every single image that came was so beautiful and dark, and I wanted them to be a book, I'm sure not as much as you, but almost, because the world needed to see it. Just some kind of shape. Otherwise, we could have published a great collage.
There's an idea.
Yeah.
I have a contract for a graphic novel that I have to do. Otherwise, I have to give a lot of money back. And I do have an idea. Again, it's been very hard. It's been a real struggle. And Hallie's been through every slog through the mud on this one with me. It's a complicated, that's nothing I want to go into about why it's been so hard, but just at the point where I thought I couldn't do anything. Last year, actually, my Mexican vacation was like nothing like you saw here. And by the way, Sarah and I have never been to the beach in Mexico. We've never even seen the water there. We go up into the mountains and we continue our creative work. And after I got this jacket done, I did get down to work on writing sort of a screenplay for this thing. And I came up with something that kind of reminded me of a little lost black and white Bergman film. Very depressing, probably totally non-commercial, but it totally was from my heart. I felt really good about it. Made Sarah cry. Hallie liked it. And best of all, my editor really is enthusiastic about it. So that's going to be my work in Mexico this winter, is trying to get at least sketches for that. Mine.
Daily work schedule.
It's changed since I've started going to the gym so much. I used to be a morning person. I used to get up and work from like 8 to noon, and then have lunch, and then maybe do a little work at the end of the day. But now, I don't know. I go to the gym, I come home, I answer emails between that and lunch, and then I take a little snooze for 20 minutes, and then I get to work, and that starts about 2:30 in the afternoon. And then I'll work till maybe 7 in the evening. And that's the way it's changed. But it's sort of it's a different energy, energy dispersed in different places.
It works for you to have the success schedule every day, like a 9 to 5 type job.
Yeah.
Kind of do the same stuff all the time to get through.
I just read a thing by, in a biography of Ingmar Bergman, the filmmaker. He was saying as he got older, he was so happy to move to this little remote island. He said, because there I could be lazy. And I thought, how could he the greatest filmmakers on earth and one of the most prolific call himself lazy. I'm lazy, but somebody, the biographer put in a little footnote saying that only a person who is truly disciplined can call themselves lazy, if that makes any sense. Obviously, he sat down every day and wrote like a madman for a certain spate of time. But then for the rest of the day, unlike people who have to go to work at a corporation or something, he fomented ideas and relaxed and let it flow that way. And I think that may sound like an enviable life, but it's not easy, and it's not being lazy. It's I guess there is an artist or a writer giving himself the luxury of time to let the ideas boil.
What about you, Holly? Which, being an agent and writer, how do you balance the daily schedule?
Oh my God.
She's also got a family of 3.
Yeah. It's fabulous.
I came into writing much later in my life, so I started in 2007. And I've become, the picture books I squeeze in at night, in the morning, when I have a few hours, when they're getting close to being ready to be born. I go to a hotel for several days and just stay there, but not until they're closer to ready, when I see what it's going to be. The novel, I had to get really disciplined because I finally did finish a first draft. I'm not shown to anyone yet, but I take every morning train ride on New Jersey Transit. I don't talk to anyone. People who want to socialize, now everyone knows I'm doing this. It takes about 60 days to form a new habit. That's what brain picking says. So I do that. I just squeeze it into any extra crack. I find my daughter's at her piano lesson. I have 45 minutes. I have my laptop. It's been squeezed into every crack in my life I have. So that's
In
why
those days when you go to a hotel, I know the hotel she goes to, it's a very nice hotel, and it would be so easy to just order up room service or sit around in the bar or walk out into Central Park. But every time Holly goes there, she says, I'm going into the mouth of the wolf. And she's
the
in
rabbit
there.
hole, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I hunt and gather food, and I stay in the hotel. Although the last time I took I got one treat for myself, and I watched The Voice because it was the final. That was my big treat. Yes.
We both read a lot, yeah. You read a lot for work, though, too, not just for pleasure, right?
A great sacrifice of being an agent is, fortunately I read lots and lots earlier in my life, but I do read and edit many manuscripts. Not too many bad. I don't really read things after page 5 that I'm not interested in. So that's a plus of having more seniority and, feeling confident that I haven't missed the next great thing if I'm not hooked by page 5. Although that puts a lot of pressure on everyone here, because even with my own work, if they're not hooked by page 5, they might toss it, but that's kind of...
I've heard that a lot, though. Page 5 is almost a standard from a lot of editors and agents that you're not hooked by that.
It's kind of ruthless, but it's our life and our time. And how many bad stories do you want to read in your life if you have the choice not to read them?
Stephen King said, and I love this quote, that reading is like pumping a well. You're pumping and pumping and pumping, and nothing's coming out. Stop pumping.
Go to the movies.
Sorry?
Go to the movies.
I think also listening, watching people talking, listening, not seeing what's around you, every single thing you do in your life, the movies you see, the books you read, what street you walk on, looking at the shops, looking at, I work in the fabric district, and what size do these bolts of cloth come in, and inspiration is everywhere.
Mm.